What is good, Raider Nation? It's your boy Sanjit back at it with another video. The Raiders suck, man. The Raiders absolutely suck. It's been over. We found out some things today. Kenny Pickett's definitely not the future, right? I think that's very, very, very clear at this point. It was a fun week though, right? Talk a little bit about Kenny Pickett, have a little bit of hope, but realization set in pretty quickly. The Eagles, such a better football team than the Raiders. And it's crazy because I don't even think the Eagles are that good of a football team this year, right? Like from top to bottom, they're not that good. They're a very conservative football team, right? Like Jalen Hurts was, he had 15 passes today, 12 of 15, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns. And two of those 3 touchdowns were basically handoffs, right? To Dallas Goedert forward passes essentially. But the Raiders still got blown out 31-0. And truth be told, they should have probably had another touchdown. Should have probably been another touchdown at the end of the game. Obviously, our defense ended up getting the stop, but the backups of the Eagles, and I think some of the starting unit for the Eagles were still out there, but backup wide receivers, backup running back, backup. Some of the other guys were kind of backups. These guys drove right downfield, got all the way down to the 1 yard line. There was like 10 minutes left, and they just basically wasted the entire clock. Uh, and to be fair to Kenny Pickett, I see a comment that kind of says this as well. Um, to be fair, Kenny Pickett, the offensive line does suck. And I will say this, one of the things that I think I kind of found out in today's game, and this is something I already knew, right? But I think a lot of people kind of, they're kind of like 50-50 with this. But one of the things that I think I found out was that the Raiders' offensive line is really, really bad, right? Holy roller says Pickett was running for his life. No offensive line, brother, just like Carr. Could not agree more with this. Um, it's crazy because you look back at Derek Carr's career and he had the most success. Like, year two, year three was the breakout year that he had. And then he had some good years, right? He had like 3 really good years for the Raiders. And then they kind of started to revamp that offensive line in 2017, 2018. Going into 2018, I think was the year where they drafted Colt Miller. Donald Penn got moved to right tackle, but I think he got hurt pretty much like right away and missed most of the season. They started to get rid of guys like Rodney Hudson and Clutchy Assembly, and I think a year later Gabe Jackson was out as well. We have to revamp the offensive line. At this point, it's very clear the Raiders need a new quarterback. I think you got to get a new quarterback, obviously, but I think you also have to get that offensive coordinator to pair him up with, which takes us into our first super chat. Shout out to you, BDub7989. Sanjit, who would be your preferred head coach? I want Salah plus a good offense corner like Dable. Spytek, Salah, Dable seems like a good regime. Thoughts? I would not disagree with bringing in Robert Salah. The only thing I hesitate with, with Robert Salah is he's gonna only go as far as his offensive coordinator takes him. With the Jets, he hired I forget the guy's name, but he hired the coach, and I think it was a coach that was also kind of with Aaron Rodgers. It never really worked out, right? And with that, Robert Saleh also ends up losing his job pretty quickly, right? Some people are saying sooner rather than later. Some people said the Jets made a mistake. So I wouldn't disagree if we don't hire Clint Kubiak, who would be my number one choice, and I don't even know if Kubiak's going to want to become a head coach this season. He was with the Saints. He was very good with the Saints, at least early on in the season before the injuries kind of hit. Then he obviously came to the Seahawks this most recent season, and even with the Seahawks, the guy looks really good as a coach. I don't know if he's ready to become a head coach this season, but if the Raiders could somehow bring him over, that would be my number one pick as our coach. And here's the thing, you bring over Clint Kubiak, you probably have the number one overall pick. We're going to play the Giants. There's no way this Raiders team is going to beat the Giants. It's just not happening. The Giants beat the Eagles, right, early on this season. And the Giants, even today, I don't know if they're winning or if they're close. I know they're playing the Commanders. I think they were down 1 touchdown, which was the last time I kind of saw that score. When you watch the Giants play, they are a much better team than the Raiders. So I find it hard to believe we're going to end up beating the Giants. And that's going to be the game that's going to decide the number one overall picks. We're not beating the Chiefs. We're not beating any other team that we're playing this season. Uh, again, if you have the number one overall pick, you could tell Clint Kubiak, you get to pick your quarterback. You get the number one quarterback coming out. And I don't know if Fernando Mendoza is the number one quarterback. I know he won the Heisman yesterday. But the Heisman doesn't guarantee you're the number one pick, right? Uh, Obviously, I think a lot of people do kind of lean towards him as being the number one overall pick. But again, you hire Clint Kubiak, you let him make that decision. And look, the Raiders aren't so far off. And I know today's game was really, really ugly, but you have a backup group of guys in on the offensive line. Uh, Even more than that, we don't have a good offensive coach. The guys just aren't really motivated. I think most of the Raiders players have already checked out. I think guys like Maxx and Butler and Koonce, I think these guys and all the other guys, I think they're ready for the offseason to begin, right? I think they're ready to kind of, start the vacationing and those type of things, start preparing for next season. And you can't blame these guys, right? This Raiders roster and team has been really bad, but you can flip the script going into next season, right? All you got to do is make sure Colton Miller's back at left tackle, put JPJ back at center. Caleb Rogers looked pretty good at times. We'll watch the tape of today's game. I know the Raiders gave up multiple sacks. We'll watch Caleb Rogers. He looks pretty good, right? You're not going to make that change. You're going to go into next season with Caleb Rogers. And I think, it'd be a mistake. I don't think we're going to actually do it, but I think it'd be smart to put Charles Grant in at right tackle for the rest of the season and give him those reps because he'll be that much better going into next season. Um, I think, that offense line could easily be fixed by just adding another guy in, right? Vega Iona coming out of Penn State. You take him in the second round if he's there. He's a plug and play starter at left guard. So your offense line could easily be improved. You have weapons, right? You bring in a good quarterback. Does not become a screw with this. I would just roll with Pete Carroll, man. You draft that quarterback, roll with Pete Carroll, and even Geno Smith, and just take the entire season off. Let the rookie quarterback develop, and just wait until Clint Kubiak's ready to become a coach. And I say that because you look at the Bears. Everybody was saying, "Hey, the Bears need to fire Matt Eberflus. Fire this guy. He's one of the worst head coaches in the NFL." He was there for 2 years, and you already knew he was a bad coach. And they kept him for that third year because the Bears already knew, we have our quarterback of the future. It's his rookie year. Just let the guy develop, let him struggle. And going into year two, we'll go out and we'll get Ben Johnson because Ben Johnson was not wanting to come out that season. The Bears waited a year and they got their coach, and they're 10 wins this season. They're going to be in the playoffs every year going forward for as long as Ben Johnson's there. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but if Clint Kubiak is the next great offensive coach, I would wait for him as opposed to making a decision 1 year early and missing out on Sean McVay or missing out on Clint Kubiak or Ben Johnson or whoever it might be. Again, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but if you're the Raiders, you got to think long term. That would be that's my personal opinion. Wait for the best offensive coach, hire that guy, make sure you have your quarterback, and let's see what the Raiders can do as they kind of go forward. John Rodriguez says the offense is trash. Pete Carroll and his Neeple babies are trash and need to go. There's no debating this at the end of the day, right? This is a fact. I think every single Raiders fan at this point understands the Raiders' offensive line coaching is really bad. And remember, early on they said Caleb Rogers was not ready, and it's crazy because Caleb Rogers' coach was obviously Brennan Carroll, Pete Carroll's son, but a rookie gets ready with coaching, and obviously for him, he's kind of been hindered by the coaching. Um, I agree 100% with you, man. I could not, I cannot wait until Pete Carroll is officially fired. The Raiders can be so much better as they move forward, but again, they got to make that right decision going into your next coach. I truly do believe this when I say this. Your coaching is so much more important than even your quarterback. You give Ben Johnson, Jared Goff, you give him Caleb Williams. You could give Ben Johnson someone like Jimmy G. Maybe not now because he's well out of his prime, but like 5-6 years ago, and Ben Johnson would make Jimmy G work. Quarterback does not matter as much as your play caller, and I think for the Raiders, you have to get that decision right. It's been the biggest issue for the Raiders over the last 4 or 5 seasons. Ever since John Gruden has not been here, we have yet to hire a good offense coordinator. Right, we went from Luke Getsy to Chip Kelly struggled a little bit. And I don't know, kind of the full story with the Chip Kelly situation. But even, outside of Luke Getsy, like all the coaches they've hired on the offensive side have just proven to be bad. So again, I think it's very, very important. George Reyna, shout out to you for the super chat. Essentially, nothing is worse than a losing up front. The plays do not start. How did Parham and Glaze get so bad? Um, I think I think it's a good question to ask. How did these guys actually get worse coming into this season? I think Dylan, and it's hard to say they got worse. With DJ Glaze, it was always on tape that he struggled with speed. That's not anything new. I think one of the things that could have happened coming into this season is they maybe chipped less on DJ Glaze. They helped him less. They said, "Hey, we're going to have you get into true one-on-one situations more. We're not going to help you as much because we want to run 3 or 4 routes, right? We don't want to run 2 routes and have all these guys chipping. We want to run 3 or 4 routes and say, go play out in space." And with Dylan Parham, he's always kind of just been average, right? He's never really been that good. He's flashed a little bit, which is a fact, but some guys get better when like year 5, 6, and 7 comes around, especially certain guards. I think Dylan Parham's going to get a lot better as he gets older. We saw this happen with John Simpson, Lester Cotton. Both of those guys at one point were starting caliber players for the Raiders. I think Lester Cotton started like a couple of games one season, came in the next season as a starter, and then I think he got cut in that season or he got benched or something happened. And he started some games over the last couple of seasons for the Dolphins. We've seen John Simpson now become a really good guard in the NFL. I think he's with the Jets right now. Maybe he's on a different team. I can't remember. But he spent time with the Ravens. He was, kind of revamped his career a little bit. I think those two guys specifically, Parham and Glaze, just were really not that good. I think they're just kind of average players. With Glaze, it was always kind of there that he struggled with speed. He didn't have good movement. And I think as an offensive tackle, movement is by far the most important trait. And you can also maybe put some of this on coaching, but at the end of the day, when Nick Bonito lines up there as a defensive end and it's 3rd and 9, and it's a pass rushing situation, that right tackle has to win, right? There's no coach. Coaching is not going to get out there and block for you. You have to block yourself. And I think in those type of situations, DJ Glaze has been exposed a little bit this season. Dylan Parham hasn't been as bad, but I think with all the other guys kind of struggling and sucking, it just makes it that much worse for Parham. If Parham's the 5th player on the offensive line, right? If the other 4 guys are all better, you can win with Parham essentially out there, right? But if Parham's your best offensive lineman, which right now he might be your best offensive lineman out there, that's not a good thing, right? Shout out to all you guys for the super chats, 10 commandments. The worst Raiders team ever. Pete Carroll and his sons have put us in a deeper hole. This will take years of quality drafting to fix this mess. Bring back Telesco. Spytek's picks are not impressive. We saw Darian Porter today kind of get his ass kicked a little bit out there. There were a couple of, early on in the game, I think Devontae Smith beat him for, I think it was a 44-yard pass down the left sideline. We saw him on a different play have a pass interference, which got them down to, I think, like the 1 or 2 yard line. Or maybe it was the 5-yard line. And then even more than that, the A.J. Brown touchdown. I understand. I think they're technically in a specific type of coverage. I'm not 100% sure exactly what the coverage was, but it seemed like it went right off of him. And I think the broadcast crew may have mentioned like Jeremy Chin didn't get his hands on a guy, but I don't know if I 100% agree with that. Darren Porter struggled a little bit today. We're not even getting to see guys like Jack Bech have a true opportunity. Even guys like Charles Grant has not even played yet this season, right? And then you can just go even further beyond that. JJ Pegues, guys like Tonka Hemingway. We drafted a quarterback, not Cam Miller, but the other guy. I forget his name. Was it Miller? No, I forget the guy's name. He's not even on the roster anymore, right? He's just gone. And I think he was a 6th-round pick, or maybe it was a 7th-round pick. I agree, man. Some of what John Spytek has done, I agree, is not super impressive. But I will say this, I was super high on Charles Grant coming into coming into the draft, right? Before the Raiders even picked him, I was very, very high. If you guys have watched my content, Charles Grant was a guy I mentioned a lot. You can even go to Twitter, and I've talked about Charles Grant a lot on Twitter, even before the draft. He was the guy that I felt like, hey, this guy's upside's huge, right? He could be, I thought he could have been a 1st-round pick. Now, he obviously did not make it to the Senior Bowl. But if you guys remember, even for the Senior Bowl, he was the first guy the Senior Bowl invited. They did this entire video for Charles Grant. They said, regardless of where you're playing, the Senior Bowl may always bring you in. And he accepted the invite to the Senior Bowl, but he had an injury. And because of that injury, he ended up not going to the Senior Bowl, so he ended up being a 3rd-round pick. But the guy's tape shows a guy that could be a first round pick. Like Charles Grant's tape was better than like Tyler Guyton's tape coming out. Tyler Guyton was still a first round pick as well. The movement that Charles Grant has, you don't get that type of movement. Guys that are like 6'5", 6'6", with that type of wingspan, you don't get that type of combination. And he has really good strength as well, and you can kind of see the strength elements of it on tape as well. Uh, I think Charles Grant is going to end up being a good tackle for the Raiders. So, although I don't agree with all the other picks that John Spytek had, Charles Grant was the one pick that I actually really liked, and we got him in the third round as well. So we'll see how he develops, and we'll see in 2 or 3 years what Spytek's draft kind of looks like. I know Tom Telesco nailed the Brock Bowers and the Jackson Powers Johnson pick, but he didn't nail any of the other picks, right? None of the other guys have really worked out at this point. Um, we'll see. We'll just see what ends up happening at this point. But I do agree with your first point here. For me personally, this is definitely the worst Raiders team I've ever watched. All right, this is by far the worst, absolute worst team that I've ever watched. And I've watched a lot of shitty Raider teams, man. It's like just going back over the years, and I can't even think of them on top of my head, but we watched so many bad teams, and this might be by far the worst. And I think the big thing also is that it's just disappointing coming into the season. A lot of Twitter folks that covered the NFL, they told us that, hey, Geno Smith's one of the best quarterbacks that you could have had. He's such a great quarterback, and I was always kind of like iffy on Geno before the Raiders brought him in. But these guys were like sure that Geno Smith would take us into the playoffs. And then we brought in Pete Carroll, a guy that wins like 9, 10 games every single season. And even he struggles coming over to the Raiders. And I think the biggest issue that the Raiders have is the fact that Pete Carroll wanted to win now, and John Spytek is building for the future. I think those two guys, the direction is just different. And I understand for Pete why he wants to win now and why Spytek wants to build this out long term. I think John Spytek has more room, and he knows that I have a couple years here. He knows that, hey, Tom Brady kind of wanted me as the general manager. Tom Brady has Mark Davis's ear. Pete Carroll wants to win now. He doesn't have a lot of time as a coach left. So I understand why he's trying to win now. And then on the other side of this, John wants to kind of build for the future. I don't think it's going to take as long as people think. If you get that quarterback this year, and let's say you don't get the coach, so roll it back with Pete Carroll for another year, suck for another year essentially. And I know people don't want to hear that, but for the long run, it could make sense, right? If Clint Kubiak will come to the Raiders not this cycle, but the cycle after, wait it out, right? And again, I don't know if Clint Kubiak's the next Ben Johnson, right? When Ben Johnson was with the Lions, you knew this guy was going to be a really, really good coach. There's guys that have flashed, as a good coach, specifically on the offensive side, and then they were never able to kind of replicate the success. We've seen multiple coaches have, kind of go through this, right? Zach Robinson kind of went through this with the Falcons. Clint Kubiak now, to be fair, has done it in 2 different teams over 2 years. Let's see him do it again with the Seahawks. Hire him if I'm the Raiders, if we're certain he's the guy. Someone said Mendoza's too slow for the Raiders. Dante Moore is more exciting. That's interesting for sure, right? That's definitely interesting for sure. The thing with Mendoza is he is not the fastest quarterback. I agree, but he kind of reminds me like Joe Burrow, right? He has a really good arm. He has good vision, right? He has good pocket awareness. He kind of reminds me of Joe Burrow. And the thing with even a guy like Tyler Stowe, who the Saints drafted, the guy wasn't that fast, and that was a part of why he ended up not being a first-round pick. His age as well, a little bit, right? He ended up not being a first-round pick because of that. But he looks really good, right? The Saints quarterback looks like he might be the next great quarterback in the NFL. I know it's early, but like he looks really, really good. Dante Moore, I agree with you as well, looks really good as well. This is the hard thing with quarterbacks. If there's like 3 quarterbacks coming out, who's the right quarterback to have? Everybody said Caleb Williams was the quarterback that you wanted. He was a generational quarterback, but Drake May looks way better right now than him, right? So I do trust that John Spytek, whoever that coach is, Tom Brady, these guys will be able to figure it out. But if we make the wrong pick, man, and we pass up on other guys and we make the wrong pick, it's going to set us back. So we'll see what ends up happening. Mike LaFleur, Clint Kubiak, or Bobby Slowick for head coach. I'm not 100% sure with Bobby Slowick or Mike LaFleur at this point. You could go with LaFleur. I do think that, we see his brother having all that success with the Packers. And I think Mike right now is with the 49ers, or he might be the Rams offensive coordinator right now. They look good, right? So I agree with what you're saying. Maybe you could go, maybe you could bring in Robert Saleh and then say, hey, we're going to make Mike LaFleur our offensive coordinator. Because LaFleur, although he's an offensive coordinator, he's not a play caller. So he's going to have to go to another team as an offensive coordinator, the same way Clint Kubiak had to, right? He's going to have to go to another team as an offensive coordinator, and he's going to have to prove himself. So we'll see, when that time kind of comes. Um, Hopefully the Raiders figure it out, man. At the end of the day, you have to be able to figure out who your coach is going to be, who your quarterback's going to be. Octavius Prescott, shout out to you. This team is such hot garbage. 72 total yards. Is that true? 72 total yards? Uh, yeah, I think Kenny Pickett had 64 passing yards. He lost 35 yards due to sacks. And we had 46 rushing yards. That is absolutely terrible. I drafted Brock Bowers in my fantasy league this year, and he had like two good games, but the quarterback play this year, last year's quarterback play was even better than this year's. This year's just been really, really bad, and Bowers has struggled a little bit this year. So it's unfortunate because he's such a talented player, and you see him break all these tackles. But how do you only have 72 total yards? That is wild. Can we bring back Mike White to be the head coach? How about Art Shell? Heck, I'd dig up Joe Boogle from his grave at this point. The coaching would be better. It's wild how bad this coaching is, man. And I think it's a combination of the offensive line sucking, the coaching sucking, and then the quarterback's always 50-50 because at the end of the day, if Sean McVay had our coaching, Sean McVay had our quarterbacks, I would trust that he would make these quarterbacks a lot better. It always comes down to that element of it, right? But offensive line, if you have a bad offensive line, you can't. There's nothing you can do, right? If you have a bad offensive line, you're gonna be a potentially bad unit. You look at the Chiefs right now. Their offensive line's not as good, right? They traded Joe Tooney, their left guard, before the season started. They paid their right guard. They got rid of their was it their left tackle that they got rid of, or maybe he ended up leaving. And then they drafted a rookie, and that rookie's been out. He's missed a lot of this season, so they've had to go to their backup left tackle. And the Chiefs have struggled, right? They have 13 points right now against the Chargers. It's one of those things, man, where um, you know, coaching is one aspect of it, but you have to have a good offensive line. And I think for the Raiders, that's one of the issues. And look, if you can get your two guys back in Miller and JPJ, get them healthy, and if Caleb Rogers, I think, goes in as your right guard, you only need one other interior offensive lineman, assuming Charles Grant's the guy you're going to trust at right tackle, which I think John Spytek does expect Charles Grant to be the right tackle. But we need him out there, right? We need this guy to get out there and actually play for the Raiders, which I don't know why the Raiders at this point don't, right? Shout out to you for the super chat. Tommy Malott was the guy that the Raiders drafted. Um, yeah, he was definitely the guy that the Raiders drafted, who obviously we ended up, they didn't even make the roster. And it's crazy because some guys don't make the roster. You bring them back to the practice squad. They didn't even want this guy on the practice squad. They're like, man, this guy's just not ready. They probably not an NFL player, right? Someone said we should have drafted Armin Membau. Uh, you know, I think Memba has been solid, but I think sometimes you get and keep in mind the Jets have a really good offensive line. Um, I think sometimes guys also get a little overhyped, right? And I'm not saying Membau's not good. He's a good football player, but I think he's a little overhyped this season. He has not been nearly as good as what people say. I think Kelvin Banks has been a lot better for the Saints. I think Banks has been a lot better than Membau. Membau gets a lot of help, right? A lot of help, a lot of tight end chips. They run the ball a lot as well. But I think he's good, and I don't disagree. Maybe we should have taken Kelvin Banks instead of Ashton Jeanty. Um, it's always hard to decide on which guy. Would the Raiders have been better with Ashton Jeanty as well as Jack Bech, or would they have been better with Armin Membau and Trayvon Henderson? Right, which guys would they have been better with? Because could have gotten both of those guys. Now, to be fair, if you took Henderson, you might not have gotten Grant or Caleb Rogers. But I don't know. It's definitely a good point. Definitely good questions. I think over the years, if Ashton Jeanty doesn't become a really good football player, I think we're going to look back at that pick and say that was a bad pick, essentially, right? Um, Someone said Mahomes just blew out his knee. Let me pull this up real quick. Is this a fact? Can someone confirm this? That's unfortunate if he did. Um, I think they're losing anyways. And I think if they lose today, they're at the playoffs. So that's unfortunate if that's true. Uh, let's get into a couple more super chats. 10 commandments. You have to pair your first round quarterback with a long term offensive coach or coach. Mendoza plus experienced OC as head coach. I agree. This right here is definitely the formula. I see some spam. I'm gonna block that real quick. Um, I always say this right here. I always say this right here. This is definitely the winning formula. This is 100% fact. I'm not sure what happened. I'm not sure where all my comments went. They kind of just disappeared on me here. Uh, I'm sorry if some of you guys sent super chats in. I apologize. I don't know what the hell just happened. All of my chats just kind of reset. Let me see if I could change this and potentially bring them back up. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I apologize, but yeah, it's definitely been a bad season for the Raiders. Someone saying that Gardner Minshew is in. I saw a someone put a video out. I forget who it was that was talking, but they're saying, hey, if the Chiefs are out of the if the Chiefs are out of the if the Chiefs are out of the season, right? Like if they're not going to be a good team or if they're not going to make the playoffs or whatever, they should just let the Raiders win and ruin the Raiders' future. And I forget who put this out there, but that's a really, really, really good point that the Chiefs could easily do. I could see Andy Reid definitely doing that. And someone said, obviously Gardner Minshew was in. I think someone said that he just threw an interception. So I think the Chiefs are going to end up losing, which means the Chiefs, a year, they won two straight Super Bowls, went to a third Super Bowl last year. They lost, and now they're at the playoffs. How wild is that? What if this is the end of the Chiefs? What if this is it? What if this is the end of the Chiefs? Going forward, what if this is the end of it, man? How crazy would that be if the Chiefs never make the playoffs? And Andy Reid's, I think he's in his 70s. He retires. I think without Andy Reid, the Chiefs are not the same type of team. Even if they have Patrick Mahomes will never have the same success as he's had with Andy Reid. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Definitely interesting. And I do apologize. If you guys did send a super chat in, I don't know why they all just kind of, all my chats just went away and it just kind of restarted. So I only see the most recent chats at this point. I didn't watch the actual game. Obviously, I'm live, but I have like the game cast from ESPN up right here, and I saw the Chiefs had the ball and they threw an interception, and the Chargers got the ball. Um, I see the Washington Commanders also ended up winning. The Chicago Bears ended up winning. Houston won, and I think the second games are going to start here in about 10 minutes. Yeah, the Chiefs. Who knows, man? Maybe they're done for the season. Um, I just saw Minshew throwing a bad pick. Uh, we'll see if Gardner Minshew plays the rest of these games. What if he wins some games, and what if the Chiefs are like, hey, we're gonna just go forward with Gardner Minshew? Now, wouldn't that be wild? Absolutely wild. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes also isn't as young anymore. So that run that the Chiefs have kind of been on, that's gonna end at some point soon, right? Um, we'll get into some more of these super chats. Someone said we've been rebuilding since 2008. The Raiders have sucked, man, for a really, really long time. I will say one thing that the Raiders have not done that I think other teams have done, right? Uh, you look at the Bears did this most recently. They drafted Justin Fields in the first round, or even before him. Mitchell Trubisky was a first round pick. I think he was a top 5. He might have been the number 1 overall pick. I don't remember exactly, but the Bears drafted first round quarterback, was it 2017, 2018 in Trubisky. He wasn't good. They drafted Justin Fields. I think he was the 15th overall pick. He may have been an early second round pick. But then they drafted Caleb Williams again, right? The Bears, even though it didn't work, just keep drafting those quarterbacks until you get it right. You just got to keep doing it. The Raiders, I think the mistake they've made is you had a little bit of success with Derek Carr, and you saw that Derek Carr was obviously on a downward trajectory. But one, you didn't replace him soon enough. And two, once you did replace him, you didn't draft a quarterback. Instead, you end up with all these different guys, right? Jimmy G, Gardner Minshew, Geno Smith. At the end of the day, you have to pair up that coach, but you also got to get that quarterback. And I think that's kind of been one of the issues with the Raiders. Um, I don't know. Hopefully, this is the year they end up drafting a. Hopefully, this is the year they end up drafting the guy essentially for the future. We'll see if Mendoza's the guy. We need the Titans, the Falcons, the Saints, Seahawks, Packers, Lions, Vikings, and Dolphins to win this week to help our draft strength schedule. I didn't know the strength schedule changes every week. I thought that was fixed, but if that's the case that it changes every week, um, regardless of if it changes or not, at the end of the day, if the Raiders lose to the Giants, we're gonna have the first overall pick. I think the only other team with 2 wins is I think the Titans at that point. Um, but even then, I think the Titans' strength schedule is a lot higher or a lot different than the Raiders. I don't know if that would change. Um, Jay says you nailed it, Sanjit. The quarterback's the most important position. You keep swinging until it hits because if it hits, you're good for 20 years. This is a fact, 100% fact. And if the Raiders wanted to get like a veteran quarterback, I wouldn't be out on that, right? Like if you said, hey, Kyler Murray, the Cardinals don't want this guy anymore. They're having success with whoever else. They don't want Kyler Murray. I would be okay if the Raiders wanted to get someone like that, but you can't give up like 3 first-round picks. It'd have to be 1 first-round pick to get that type of quarterback. And even then, if you do go out there and get that type of quarterback, you need to have that coach. Because by far, you have to have that coach. And some people do think John Spytek prefers veterans over the rookie quarterbacks, which I think that's going to be interesting to see if he actually does prefer that. 10 Commandments said, to your point, Denver has improved because of coaching. The Chargers improved because of coaching. The AFC is not a walk anymore for the Chiefs. Coaching is the most important. That is a fact. Coaching matters so much. You can go back to when the Chiefs actually hired Andy Reid. The Chiefs struggled, right? And then they hired Andy Reid. Then out of nowhere, I think Alex Smith was one of their quarterbacks. I forget who else they had. I forget who else the Chiefs had as their quarterback. But they've had these different quarterbacks coming in, and then with Alex Smith, who a lot of people wrote off, the Chiefs have success with him. They make the playoffs under Alex Smith. Matt Castle may have been with the Chiefs for a little bit. I think we played him where he dropped like 6-7 touchdowns against us. That game always just kind of sticks in my mind. And yeah, it's just one of those things. If you get the right coach, that's all that matters at the end of the day. Because you look at the Denver Broncos, who get Sean Payton, the Chargers get Harbaugh, and the Raiders get Pete Carroll, and just look at the difference. Pete Carroll's not a good coach, and it's not like Pete Carroll just became a bad coach. He just hasn't been good for a really, really, really long time. Right? It's been a really long time since he has not been a good coach. The you look back to like 2018 through 2022 or whatever, it was just downwards for the Seahawks. They bounced back a little bit because of Geno Smith that like first year before they ended up paying him. I think year 2 he looked pretty good, but it was just down. Even with Geno Smith, it was kind of downhill, right? The Seahawks didn't move just off of Pete Carroll. They decided to move off of Geno Smith as well, and they got better. So don't overlook that. I see someone saying that with Patrick Mahomes, it's an Achilles injury, which that's again that's just crazy. I would not have thought that this guy would end up getting hurt. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what the update is on that. Obviously at the end of the day, the Raiders season's been over for a while. This is not a good football team, but hopefully we can bounce back. If we get the first overall pick, it sets us forward, obviously. And we'll see what ends up happening. I am going to cut the live video here. I do apologize if I missed any of the super chats because it did kind of reset for me. Hopefully the Raiders kind of bounce back as we go forward. And then, more than that, we'll see if Geno Smith kind of comes back. We'll see if, they're saying Colt Miller should be back in this next game potentially. We'll see what the Raiders can end up doing. If there's one thing I want to see the Raiders do before the season ends, I want to see Caleb Rogers out there. I want to see Charles Grant out there. I want to see some of the younger guys, JJ Pegues, Tonka Hemingway. I want these guys to start. Tyree Wilson is awful, right? There was a couple plays I was watching him. just blown off the line of scrimmage, man. It just looks really, really poor right now. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I am going to end the stream here. I'm not feeling good today. It's not just because of the Raiders sucking, but just don't feel good. But I hope you guys have a great Sunday. Enjoy some of these games. If you guys do fantasy football and you're in the playoffs, good luck to you guys. Hope you guys all have a great rest of your Sunday. I will be making a video tomorrow. We'll check in on Caleb Rogers and watch his tape a little bit. Let me know what you guys think. Thumbs up, subscribe.